Vibha is an Indian word that means ray, like a ray of light, and in our case, a ray of hope.
We look at ourselves as a social venture catalyst. Our job is to seed, scale, and grow social entrepreneurs who understand the problem very deeply. We have one and only one mission, which is to ensure every single child attains his or her right to health, education, and opportunity. We have to date raised about, I would say, a little more than $13 to $14 million, maybe close to $15 million over the past 25 years. We have impacted directly the lives of over 350,000 kids, indirectly a lot more because of all the indirect activity that goes on with that. We today have close to about 30 projects that we fund. Over our lifetime, we have participated with about 250 such projects. Writing the check is the smallest thing that we do. The largest thing we do is working with the social entrepreneur day in and day out in an iterative manner, putting in processes, thinking of new creative ideas of how to seed, scale, and grow, looking at all their, what best practices do they need in marketing, accounting, IT, webs, bringing in more volunteers, in fundraising, in getting the community involved. All of this comes in through Vibha. So here's what I would like-minded people who want to do something and are looking for an avenue to participate in the upliftment of underprivileged children, particularly in India. Vibha is your footstool to make that happen. Our job is to empower, educate, and enable any single individual that wants to make a difference in the life of an underprivileged child. You can participate with us by, of course, donating to our cause. It is our job to ensure we work with the system to make sure that the plight of the underprivileged child is solved once and for all, and we'd love for you to be part of it.
So thanks to Vibha.
Thanks to Vibha.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Host this event by Vibha Atlanta, and I thank you for this. A little background about myself. First of all, I'm a mom of 2 kids. I am a dentist in Alpharetta. I, for all intensive purposes, am an ABCD. I grew up in California, went to University of California, Davis. I went to Northwestern University Dental School, and the only reason I mention it is because of today's event. It's somewhat irrelevant today because Northwestern, being a good school that it is, does not even have a dental school anymore. But I just wanted to give you some background of where I come from. It might shed some light as to the mentality that I may share with you later throughout the program. Vibha, a bright future for children. While Vibha has raised over $16 million, supported over 250 projects in India and in the US, and provide for over 3 million underprivileged children, today, this afternoon, our mission is to facilitate a brighter future for your children. This program is brought to you thanks to the existing support from sponsors and donors. I urge you, if you haven't done so already, to make a donation as generous as you can. No amount is too small or too large, to Vibha Atlanta, so that we may continue to serve children. The College Readiness Program was created to help parents and kids alike to demystify, detangle, and deconstruct this daunting process of preparing for college, the college application, and the selection process. By no means is this meant to be a panacea for your child's process, but we hope that you gain some pearls and become more enlightened in the next 3 to 4 hours. There is no way, there is no one way, there is no roadmap. High school today, when I tell you, trust me, I went to high school here, today has become a journey to college. I sincerely hope that you take away some pearls and a better understanding of this journey, irrespective of where the destination may be. Parents and high schoolers, please do not compare your self-worth, your self-confidence, or yourself with the stories and paths presented here today. May the paths taken by others inspire you to plan your own journey, unique to you. Parents and community, we hope that your takeaway is how you can better help guide and navigate yourselves and your high schoolers through the process. Parents, these kids need a soft place to land during these hard times and the stressful times that they're about to ensue. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Jay Yadav. Jay Yadav is an interventional cardiologist and founder of a number of successful companies and currently founder and CEO of Myris LLC. Dr. Yadav's scientific and entrepreneurial work has been widely recognized. Just to name a few, American Heart Association Top 10 Scientific Advances 2003, Ellis Island Medal of Honor 2004, 50 Best Doctors in the History of the Cleveland Clinic 2011, Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Healthcare 2011, Intel Innovation Award 2011, and Atlanta CEO of the Year 2016. He is a board member of TIE, a global organization dedicated to encouraging entrepreneurship, where he has supported the Young Entrepreneurs Program for many years. He is chairman of Georgia Bio and has helped to create the Biomed Investor Network to facilitate funding for new life sciences in the Southeast. Jay is also a founder and board member of the Global Center for Medical Innovation at Georgia Tech for facilitating corporate cooperation and entrepreneurship in the life sciences. He is a board member of many organizations, and he is on the advisory board on entrepreneurship of the Yale School of Management. Please help me welcome Dr. Jay Yadav.
Thank you, Veena.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Veena, for that kind and overly long introduction, but thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Narayan and Vijay for inviting me. This is an interesting forum. You have VIBA on one hand, which is helping underprivileged children in India, and we have a group of relatively privileged children here striving in the next step in their journey. So I think it's really nice what you guys have done at VIBA to put these things together. And I think it's important to remember that intelligence is relatively evenly spread throughout the world. And every village in India has at least one smart child that could really benefit from education and could make a difference and move the world forward. So I laud what you guys are doing. When I thought about the comments I should make today, when Mr. Rekapalli invited me to speak, I thought about, there seem to be two themes here. One is education, the power of education to transform lives, to transform society, and the other is transitions, right? The transition that you're about to undergo. And so I thought about my own life, and I thought about the role education played for me in the transition that I'd undergone. I'm a lot older than you guys, and so I'm going to share some of that with you today, and I'm not going to just give you a bunch of abstract concepts and ideas. I'm going to give you events that actually happen and see if out of those we can abstract some general principles that maybe will be of help to you. And so I've called this scientific entrepreneurial journey. So I've been very lucky in the sense that I've been able to work on scientific things that I found interesting and important, which have actually made a difference for the lives of many people. The first thing was stroke, and so the work that I did is improve the outcomes for stroke treatment for patients around the world. The second thing I worked on was heart failure. So large public health problems, and this has to do with the concept of working on things that are perhaps difficult, perhaps meaningful to you, and so improving the treatment of that. And along the way, to implement some of these things, because they involved new technology which did not exist, I had to start companies. So my journey as an entrepreneur was purely serendipitous. I had no plan. I don't come from a family of businessmen. I come from a family of either teachers or doctors. There's like no other choices, right? And a few engineers. That's about it, right? So this was unusual, and it was really done out of necessity. And I'll share how that happened. I've been lucky that these companies have been deemed to be valuable and acquired by large companies like J&J, and they're still operational. So let me just start kind of at the beginning, and where education plays a big role. So I was born in India, actually, in North India, a little bit north of New Delhi. And my father had come here soon after I was born to be a student. And so I was there with my mother. She didn't have a lot of money. She was a teacher. So she sent me to the local Indian schools. And I think this is where Vibha comes in. And these schools were terrible. I hated them. They were horrible. And I ran away. So I'd run away from school or lock myself in my room. And I wouldn't go to school. My mother was terrified. She thought I was going to be a grass cutter. You may not appreciate what a grass cutter means in those days. They actually cut grass by hand with a machete. So it was really a terrible thought. So I refused to go to school, so she was forced to send me to St. Mary's Academy, which was like the school, like the Westminster of merit at that time, whatever, right? So, and it took I think it was a financial stretch for her. But I liked the school, and I stayed. I didn't run away from school anymore. So I think the first lesson here is, no matter where you are in life, if you don't like what is happening to you, make some noise, put up a fuss. Don't cooperate. Because if I'd kept going to those really horrible schools, I don't know, maybe nothing would have changed, maybe something would have turned out differently, right? But anyway, I complained and got into a better school, and that was helpful to me. The next big thing that happened was that I got really sick. I was very sickly when I was a child. And I had typhoid twice. Now, you don't know what typhoid is because you're living here, but in a lot of the world, typhoid is still present. And it's a pretty bad disease. It's due to poor water quality and sanitation. And you've got a chance of dying if you get typhoid, but you certainly will be sick for a while. You'll be sick for weeks to months. So I was laid up in bed for, like 3 months each time. And I had nothing to do. There was no television, remember, okay? So I read a lot. So here's an example of something bad happening to you, which, with the benefit of hindsight, was helpful. And so, Nietzsche is often overquoted, but this certainly is a valid example. If it doesn't kill you, it might make you stronger. Not always, but it might make you stronger, okay? The next big thing was we did move to the U.S. My father was teaching. He was a sociologist. And he was teaching at a little college called Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina, a little town, about 25,000 people near Charlotte. And we lived, this picture literally could have been taken from where we lived. We lived in faculty housing across the street from the observatory. And so I'd walk over to the observatory. I was like 10, 11 years old then, and in the summers I'd go there, and they were really nice to me. They'd let me hang out, let me look through the telescope. So this was critical because it really was my first awareness of science, an interaction with modern science. And so this was seminal in my development. Now notice, I'm not going to dwell here on what it might have been like to be, this is a long time ago, to be the only Indian in a little town in the South in the 60s and 70s, okay? It had some drawbacks, right? But one of the things I want to share with you is that I've never chosen to be a victim. Don't be a victim. Take control of the environment. Do what you can do. Don't dwell on the negatives. So I'm telling you about the positives that occurred to me here, which was an introduction to science. The next big transition was I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to Yale out of a little town in the South. And this was almost as big a transition as coming from India to the US. Maybe more of a transition, because this was a totally different world for me. And I was very young too. I was 15 when I went there. So it was quite a change. And again, there's some drawbacks with that also, but I'm not going to dwell on those. But I'm going to dwell on the positives, which were that I had a huge, I was very malleable, right? I wasn't set in my ways. I was like almost a blank tablet to be written upon, right? And so I had a lot of great professors. I had got a very broad education. Now, I rebelled in my own ways. You're thinking, I rebelled? Give me a break, kid. You're like straight and narrow, just studying away, I'm sure. But I did rebel. And my rebellion was that my parents were social scientists. My father was a sociologist. He's passed away. But my mother was a psychologist. So I went into the hard sciences. So I majored in physics and biochemistry. So that was my rebellion. That's a little funny, come on, that was my rebellion, okay? So anyway, so I had some great professors who really taught me how to think and affected me, and two of them are pictured here. This is Dr. Joan Stites, and this is Dr. Tom Stites. So she taught me biochemistry. They were married to each other, as you might guess, and he taught me physical chemistry and some other little more complicated stuff. And then, back in those days, to graduate, you had to take an oral examination. It doesn't happen anymore, but you actually had to sit with 3 professors, an oral examination. And it was a pretty open-ended exam, right? And they tell you right in front of you what they think of your answers, right? So it's not like today where everything's nice and softened for you. It's pretty harsh. And so basically 2 of them said, oh, this guy is an idiot. Like, these answers are terrible, and they're way out there, and and these are very open-ended questions, right? Dr. Stites, though, said, no, I think this is pretty good. I think these are not bad. And he sort of overruled the other 2, and I was passed. So hopefully what I've done later in life has vindicated his judgment. And I feel vindicated too, because he did win a Nobel Prize in 2009 in chemistry. So really good professors, good people. The other person who was very influential on me was Professor Norvin Hine. Now, Professor Hine just passed away this year at the age of 103. And he was a professor of Sanskrit and Hinduism at the Yale Divinity School. Now, some of you may be going through this or about to go through this, but I had a big existential crisis when I was roughly your age or a little younger. And so I really had a lot of questions about why things are, the world, philosophy, et cetera. So I actually took a lot of courses at Yale Divinity School and had a lot of courses with Professor Hine. And I learned a lot about my own culture through him, and he was very erudite. And his life was interesting. He had served in India during World War II and developed an interest in Indian thought and language at that time. Very influential. Somewhere in there, I read Gandhi's autobiography, which many of you may have already read, but I hadn't read it till then. And all of this is very important to me, because I sort of came to the conclusion that, at least for me, science couldn't exist in a vacuum, that there had to be a sense of social purpose and interaction that helped the average person, not the elites, but the common man. So at least, and I'm not saying there's an absolute, I'm not making value judgments, but I felt that at least I had to use science for something that had immediate benefit to people. So at the last minute, I decided to go to medical school. So I was not pre-med. I would advise all of you not to be pre-med, okay, in the sense that you shouldn't be a technician, okay? Get well educated, learn to think, and then you can be, if you want to be a lawyer, engineer, or a doctor, go ahead and do it, but don't start out life in the professional class, okay? That would be my advice. And don't get too worked up about the college admission process either. Life tends to work out. We're fortunate in the US that we have so many good colleges. We have like a cornucopia of universities, right? And all of them are well above median for the earth, okay? So relax a little bit, try to get well educated, would be my advice to you. So I'm a doctor, then the next big thing happened, which is I met my wife-to-be. Now this is real, and you're thinking, why the hell is he talking about this? Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. One is I only met her one time, so it's not like I saw her every day. She was at a different hospital than I was at. This is a Duke, and if I had not acted immediately, I may never have seen her again. So keep that in mind. You have to be decisive and have the confidence to move fast in certain instances. And the other reason is critical, and we just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary this past Friday, actually. Other reason is critical is that the family that you're born into and the family that you acquire makes an enormous difference to what you actually accomplish. If I had not had my father with the courage to come here a long, long time ago, my mother to educate me, and a spouse that has given me the freedom to indulge myself in very high-risk things where I bet everything we had, literally every nickel, and borrowed a couple of more nickels, right? Not every spouse lets you do that. So it is the decisions all these decisions make a difference in what you ultimately accomplish in life. So that's why I bring this up for you. And this was in 1985. The same year in 1985, this occurred, which was a single patient. I remember this patient. And so my goal had been, like a lot of idealistic young doctors back in those days, I wanted to cure cancer. We thought cancer was curable back then, okay? Come to learn better since then, but at least at that point it seemed like a solvable problem. But you were still required to do other rotations, and so this was a neurology rotation. And this lady comes in, she was like late 40s, African-American lady, and she had occlusion of the left middle cerebral artery, which is one of the main arteries in the head. And you can see this gray area. This is all, the stroke is very large, and it's caused swelling, just like if you got hit in your arm, it would swell, and it's pushing the brain structures over the other side. So we did all kind of stuff, but we never opened up the artery to restore blood flow. We just did all kind of silly things, none of which worked. 5 days later, she died. And so I was there for most of that 5 days and nights. In those days, we did not have the work schedule that we have today in medicine, so you really would be in the hospital for days on end today. That's been regulated out of existence. But there was some benefit to it in the sense that you actually learn what happens to patients in a sequential, evolutionary fashion. And what is going on here that And so she's got this blockage, and I was very frustrated by this because she died. I got to know her family really well. I was the only one who talked to the family every day. Got to know the family really well. She was not very old. She had children, etc. Her mother was still alive. And the other thing that really got me mad was that just a month before, I'd been on the cardiology rotation, where thanks to this guy, we were saving lives every day, right? People would come in, they're like, again, this is a long time ago. They were half dead with a heart attack, would open the artery, a few days later they'd walk out, right? And the phenomena was very similar, yet in one area we're doing this, other area we're not doing. It didn't make any sense to me. And Dr. Grunzik was a really interesting person, and he died that year. So a lot happened in 1985, but just a few years before he died in a plane crash, he created this. And his experience is interesting and a lesson for you guys. So he was German, but working in Switzerland. He had this idea, because until that point, we would go from the outside, right? We make an incision, going from the outside, fix the artery, etc. But his idea was, why do that? God, nature has created this highway inside your body. Why not just go inside it? It makes a lot of sense now. It seems pretty obvious. Most great ideas seem very obvious after they've been done. They're not so obvious before they've been done, okay? So this was heresy, okay? It was very controversial. His professor in Zurich forbade him from doing this. On the weekend, when the professor was not there, he went ahead and did patient alpha. The patient lived, did well. Great thing, right? Guess what happened on Monday? He was fired. Yeah. So he was fired on Monday, right? And luckily, Spencer King at Emory had the foresight to hire him, and he came to Emory, actually did a lot of his work at Emory. And then, unfortunately, he was a pilot and was piloting his own plane and died. And then, another interesting lesson, there was a guy before him, Werner Forsman, also in Germany. He was the first person to actually put a catheter inside a human artery or vein. And again, he was actually a urologist, not a cardiologist, okay? And again, the professor said, do not do this. He did it anyway, and he did it on himself. Now, imagine this. Did it on himself, survived, was also fired. He was not so lucky. He really had a terrible career. Took 20 years for him to get recognition. Now, he eventually got a Nobel Prize, but he had a terrible life. And so the lesson here is, so if you want to do something meaningful, do it. You should do it. Just keep in mind the world is going to push back. The status quo does not like being changed, okay? There's a lot of inertia. And so if you do something important, there's a decent chance you'll get fired, okay? If you do something really important, like Gandhi or Martin Luther King, you might get shot. So just keep that in mind as you embark on these journeys and processes. So now we're fast forwarding to 1994. So I've been working on this, right? That was 85, 1994. Been working on this problem, okay, the whole time. You know, getting paid like $25,000 a year, okay? Just keep that in mind, okay? And so we've done the animal work, done a lot of the basic science, and so here we are. I'm a fellow at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Dr. Grunzig's main fellow, Dr. Rubin, had become chairman at UAB. That's why I was there. So he was really the pioneer now that Dr. Grunzig had died. And so this patient had suffered from head and neck cancer. That's the tracheostomy here. He'd gotten radiation, and the radiation had caused essentially burns, and he had to have skin grafting. That's what you're seeing here. Now, radiation will sometimes accelerate atherosclerosis. So what had happened is that his carotid arteries, particularly one, had gotten severely blocked, but his neck was very scarred. It was like wood. He couldn't get surgery on his carotid artery. So the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, thought that this patient could only be saved through this new procedure. So this is also how things evolve, right? When there are no choices. Keep that in mind. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Almost every little saying you've been told by your teacher, your parent, actually is true. So just keep that in mind. So this is very true. And so we did this, and this is this guy's artery. It's almost completely blocked. So we did it. It worked. It looked pretty good. Hit it fine. Everybody was just shocked. The patient lived, didn't have a stroke, so it was terrific. And so chance does play a role. You know, the first time things go bad, you may not get another chance. But also remember, preparation impacts chance also, right? So you've heard the saying, luck favors the prepared mind, so that applies to life in general. So he did okay. And it was a little, and you're probably looking at this thing, oh, this doesn't look so hard. It's a little more complicated than it looks, because when you're doing this is before stents, the balloon has to stay up for 2, 3, 4 minutes, right? The patient is awake. You can't stop blood flow to half the brain for that long, right? And so we had to perfuse the brain, create this circuit, perfusion circuit, to perfuse the brain. Also, when you apply a lot of pressure to the carotid artery, your heart will stop. So you have to pace the heart. So it's a little more complicated than it sounds. And I had to do it in radiology, not in cardiology for political reasons. So there was some hair on this, a little hairier than you're thinking, okay? Anyway, it worked fine. So then stents came along, and that made life a lot easier because now the procedure was very fast. So the blood interruption is short, the bradycardia is short, so things got a lot easier, but we were still trying to understand things. So one of the things, my one advice, so part of the lesson here is keep looking. Don't get self-satisfied always, because there's always more. There are layers and layers to the onion, and nature is very complex, right? So at every minute we learn that there's whole areas we had no idea. I mean, you probably read, last year it was discovered there's a lymphatic system in the brain. Now think about how shocking that is. Because lymphatics are like old news, right? This is anatomy. Nobody does anatomy. And yet, here we are, right? So always keep looking. So we're doing really neat things, but I was doing this one thing where I was putting a little ultrasound probe here on the temple, and the bone is pretty thin here, so you can actually get to the middle cerebral artery. And what you're noticing here is when the balloon is inflated, the blood flow decreases, right? When it's deflated, blood flow is restored, but you see these red things, and this is color, this is energy is coded in color here. So these are signals that have higher energy. This is a reflection, right? It's ultrasound, it's a reflection mechanism. So these are harder objects than blood or blood cells. So these are particles of solid matter. So these are emboli. This is pieces of the plaque breaking loose and going to the brain, which is not a good thing, right? Now, you may be able to tolerate this, or little pieces, but you can't tolerate a lot of it. So this was something I felt like we had to solve. So I came up with a pretty straightforward idea, which was to create a little umbrella, essentially, with holes in it, right? Would we put in a collapsed state through the blockage. On the other side, we let it expand. Blood still flows through it. Little particles break loose. They get captured. At the end of it all, we collapse it and take it out. Seems really straightforward, right? Like, why not, right? I mean, you would all agree with it, right? Well, guess what? Nobody agreed with it. So you guys weren't in charge. If you'd been in charge, life would have been easier, but not a single person thought it was a good idea. Not a single company wanted to make this device, so it got shut down, right? And so I'd finally got a job after all this, right? And so I took all the money I had, which was about $5,000, borrowed some more money in the credit cards, hired one engineer, and made this device, okay? And it worked, which is, again, it's always shocking when things work. As you get older, you'll realize, and your parents probably know this, it's always a shock in the real world when anything works. And so always appreciate it when things do work, okay? Because generally they don't work. It actually worked, and the beauty of this was the smoking gun. Not only did it help the patient, it provided the evidence for embolization. Otherwise, embolization was theoretical. You couldn't see them happening, and they're transient, right? But here, when you take this out, this is full of Swiss cheese. It looks horrible. Who would have wanted that going through their brain? Nobody. So after this, everybody thought it was a great idea. It was like a complete 180. I was not an idiot. I was brilliant. It was a great idea, right? And then all the big companies that had turned it down now got in a bidding war, and we sold this company in 18 months from starting it to Johnson & Johnson. And that was helpful because now my wife didn't think I was crazy either. She had faith, but wives always think in the back of their mind, he's probably a little crazy. So it was very helpful, right? So, and then we did a big randomized trial. So you always want to really examine things rigorously. And we did this, and it's called Sapphire. By the way, I always come up with the names for everything I do. So Sapphire is an acronym I came up with. They're good. And we were able to show a big reduction in stroke, about 8% reduction in stroke. This is published in the lead article in the New England Journal of Medicine. And this is now 2004. So you're getting a sense of time here, right? This is glacial. You guys are probably sitting here thinking, why the hell? What is wrong with this guy? This is like taking forever. I would have done it in 2 years, right? So things in the real world take a lot of time because there's a tremendous amount of inertia and pushback on everything you might want to do. You have to be very persistent and really believe in what you're doing. And you better have a belief system that supports that, otherwise you won't be persistent. And then in 2011, okay, in 2011 becomes a Class 1 recommendation. Okay, so it's 26 years from 1985, right? So this is what it takes to change the treatment for a major disease like stroke. Now, I'd kind of lost interest in this well before this, right? And I was working on other things. And remember, we're still trying to get the middle cerebral artery. This isn't here. We want to get here, right? So we have to keep working on that. And so with a friend of mine, another Indian guy, we created the first intracranial stent. And this is made out of nickel titanium. And it's actually in Fremont. What's Fremont famous for now? Tesla. Tesla's based in Fremont. But this is way before then, okay? And we created the first intracranial stent, and we used it to retain these coils for aneurysm, but we really were trying to get the stroke. And today, this has formed the foundation of what are called stent retrievers, which have really improved the treatment of stroke, and that is really based on this work. And this was bought by Boston Scientific. And then somewhere in there, I was in the CCU taking care of patients again, and noticed that we're having a lot of heart failure patients. So everything in life, as you will learn, is a two-edged sword. So you push here, and the balloon pushes back somewhere else, right? So I think cardiology has done a terrific job of reducing the chance of dying from a heart attack. But one of the consequences, the more people are alive who have had injury to their heart from a heart attack or hypertension or valvular disease. So we had an epidemic of heart failure. There are over 1 million hospitalizations in the U.S. for heart failure. It's the largest item in the Medicare budget, about $50 billion a year. These people have hospitalizations again and again. And the reason they're having hospitalizations is because the pressure in your heart increases, and once it's damaged, that pressure gets transmitted to your lungs, and so you get congestion. That's why it's called congestive heart failure. So they have trouble breathing. They're essentially drowning. This may happen to them 2-3 times a year, and they end up in the intensive care unit, on a ventilator. They get a catheter put in their heart to measure these things, and then we're able to improve them. So the question then arises, logically, well, if we had known what was going on in their heart maybe a week or two earlier, could we have just changed the medications at that point and prevented the hospitalization? Again, seems pretty obvious, right? All this stuff is obvious, just nobody was doing it or had done it, okay? And so that was a question I asked, and it made me also think about the nature, the temporal sequence of what happens in our healthcare system, right? So if you've got a chronic disease, you'll go see the doctor 3 times a year, 4 times a year, and your actual interaction is maybe, a total of hour and a half, right? So you've got the system, right? You're trying to, and you can think in terms of simple control theory, right? Just think of like, here what we're trying to obtain is stability of a patient's condition, say heart failure, right? And there are perturbations taking place that are impacting this. The feedback is the information you're getting from the patient, okay? And then the control mechanism are the medications, et cetera, right? So think of the thermostat in your house. If it senses the temperature every second in the room, it's probably going to give you a nice straight line like this. If it's every hour, you're going to get hot, cold, like this, right? And if it's like every month, you're not going to be really happy. And that's kind of what patient care is like, right? So these patients are unstable systems. So if we could shorten that time constant, then we could really, potentially, theoretically, hypothetically, improve care. And so this is the whole idea of taking our healthcare system from a reactive system to a proactive system, right? So that's the logic here. All right, so how do you do it? Well, we could have taken this sensing technology, stuck it on a pacemaker type system, a battery, a lead. I didn't really want to do that. This is ancient technology. It's expensive, it breaks, the battery has to be changed. The Medicare people call it the most expensive battery change in the world. It clogs up the veins. It's just not elegant. So I really wanted to create something that was truly wireless. Not wireless just in transmitting a signal, that's pretty trivial. Wireless in the energy. So wireless energy transmission in the human body had never been done. It's a hard problem in physics. So we set out to do this, and now along the way I had seen this article and some work that DARPA was funding at Georgia Tech on putting wireless sensors, wirelessly powered sensors into jet engines, the combustion chamber. Now here, you've got a situation where you can't have a battery or a wire coming to it because of the temperatures and so forth involved, right? So it's a good analogy for the human body in a way. So we licensed that technology from Georgia Tech and started CardioMEMS. Turned out it didn't work. So that approach simply did not work in the body. So we kind of had to start at ground zero, and we went through 400 different sensor designs, right? So now you're getting the idea of just work. So you can have a great idea, but there may be a lot of work before the implementation actually clicks. So this took a lot of time, and we sort of felt like this along the way. We felt like we didn't know what we were doing, but we persisted, and this is not Chaitan, this is a different child of mine who's not here today doing this putting. But we persisted, and the solution actually came from a student, came from an MD, PhD student. Didn't come from the professor, didn't come from the expensive consultants we have, but it came from a student. So that's another lesson here is ideas can occur from unlikely sources. So my approach always in my companies is we try to make things very flat. We let people participate in things outside of their core project. They're allowed to comment in anything they want. They should be able to back it up. It's an intellectually rigorous environment, but they're allowed to do it. And this is a pretty elegant design. So we have a coil and a capacitor, which is a very simple, it's called an LC circuit, very simple idea. And this gap here is very small, it's in nanometers. And as the pressure changes on this, the frequency of this oscillating circuit changes, right? Some of you may already know all this in high school, but you'll certainly learn it pretty soon. And from this, we can calculate the pressure. It's a very elegant, robust design, i.e. it doesn't break, right? And this is being wirelessly powered, this coil, from the outside. And we had an overall architecture. There are other components to the system that are needed. And so we're feeling, you guys may need to change it, let's see. So we're feeling pretty good. We've solved some really hard problems in physics and electrical engineering, right? But guess what? The world doesn't care. The FDA says, so what? What does it mean? How's it going to help a patient? Medicare says, is it going to save us money, right? So we had a whole bunch of other problems. So it's not, again, this is another point that you can do something that you know is really tough, but the world may think other things are more important and want you to prove those things also. So at this point, we were getting really tired, and we felt like we really had bit off more than we could chew. But we hung in there, and we did this large random, so we had to test the hypothesis. The hypothesis was that if we change this controlled mechanism from a 120-day cycle, i.e. every 4 months, to every day, does that actually improve outcomes? And you may think, gee, it's obvious that makes outcomes better. Who thinks that? Any of you guys in the front row think, right, makes sense. Well, you guys aren't running the federal government. That's the problem, right? If you're running the FDA or Medicare, it would have been easy, but they don't have you guys. So they said, we don't know, it might make things worse. Anybody think it could make things worse? I mean, it's not a crazy idea. Sometimes information can make things worse, right? So they were not insane, but so we tested this hypothesis of shortening this time constant, this control system, by 2 orders of magnitude, right? 100 days, would that improve outcomes, right? So we did this big randomized trial called Champion. You like these names? Sapphire, Champion? No, come on, they're pretty good. So, and 64 hospitals around the country, and we showed that there's a huge benefit. There's a 30-40% reduction in hospitalizations. So again, everybody was shocked that it actually worked, okay? In a real-world setting in hundreds of patients over tens of hospitals. And this was published, and we showed that we also showed cost effectiveness. It was highly cost effective. This is very complicated acronyms here, I'll skip that, but it was cost effective. And we published this in the Lancet as a lead article. And so now you're getting a sense of time here too, right? So this is done in 2008, studies 2011, gets approved in 2014, company gets acquired by Abbott in 2014. This year, someone else working with our device showed a mortality reduction, which is really hard to do. Mortality, to show a change in life expectancy is very difficult for any medical treatment, especially in something like heart failure where you've got 20 layers of treatment. So this is, stood the test of time, and we're very pleased. This is helping a lot of people. So we've created this concept of using devices to manage medication to really create what's called integrated disease management. And then just finishing up here, so then what I'm working on now, we had been looking at, and this again is an idea I've been working on for, hopefully you're seeing that things are done in parallel. So work on more than one thing at a time, right? Because they're like little plants that you're planting or rockets that you're launching, whatever analogy you want to use, right? So I was not really happy with the materials that we had to make medical implants, right? Titanium, Vina the dentist, I believe she said, right? So titanium for dental implants, right? So titanium is used widely in the body, right? Cobalt, chromium, stainless steel, they're not terrible, but they could be a lot better, right? We really wanted a better material. And again, having a diversity of interests helps. So because my original love is off the earth, I'm always keeping up with what's going on. And it turns out there's this alloy, molybdenum, which is used in some very special application, which really has some good properties. And so, but it's a little hard to work with. So it's non-trivial to get it into a medical implant, but we've been working on it, and we have succeeded. And so what we can do, and the first thing we're working on is spine surgery. You know anything why spine surgery? Because my heart is really good, but my back is pretty bad. And so I'm going to be a patient pretty soon, and so I decided to improve this. Okay, so that's the logic here if you're wondering why, okay? And so what we can do is, this is a current titanium implant, and this is a molybdenum implant. It's half the size. Now remember, the body generally doesn't contain any empty space. So there's muscle and tissue here, so the smaller we can make the implant, the better off the patient will be. The less invasive the surgery is, the faster the recovery is, just better all around, right? So and the other thing we're implementing here is, so as you make surgery less invasive and minimally invasive, you can no longer see what's going on, right? So for the spine surgeons, they're working through little tubes now, right? So it'd be nice if they had X-ray vision, they could see the spine versus doing a whole lot of actual X-rays, right? So we're taking advantage of the products that you guys, I'm sure, are following in augmented reality and applying that to surgery. It has to be a little more precise than what Magic Leap is doing and so forth, but this is not a real spine. This is a CT of a patient's spine, which is a model that's being projected into this volume, and it's locked in place. You can walk around it. You can put the pins right into it. So we're combining all these things and to really improve the surgical experience. The last thing here is, so I get to have fun also, right? You're thinking, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun too, right? So the names of all these products, anybody see a pattern here? No? Huh? So it's a little tough because the navigation system is called Galileo, and these are the Galilean moons of Jupiter that he discovered. Okay, so there's one more that's left out, Ganymede, and if you understand the legend of Ganymede, you'll see why I left it out. So anyway, so we get to have a little fun, and we keep coming back to the first interest, which was astronomy. And so I'd leave you with just some key concepts, hopefully, that you've gotten yourself from this. Intellectual curiosity. Curiosity in general is critical. And if you don't have, and all these things are interrelated, because if you don't have curiosity, you may not discover what you're passionate about, right? Because it takes experimentation and trying a lot of different things. You discover your passion. I don't tell my children what to do, because for you to be really good at something, you have to be passionate. If I tell you what to do, that may not be what you're passionate about, right? So figure it out. And intellectual breadth. You can't really do that without intellectual breadth, and that's linked to curiosity. Adversity. Chances are you're going to have some adversity. In fact, it's 100% of some type that you will have to overcome. And overcoming that, it will not be possible if you're not passionate about this, right? And if you don't have a strong belief system which guides you through this, there'll be some random events, there'll be chance, but remember what we said, the luck favors the prepared mind. So all these things come together, and the culmination is that you're able to lead then a meaningful life, work on something meaningful. And so hopefully you found this helpful. I probably took up more time than I was supposed to. Happy to answer any questions, and best of luck on your journeys forward.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. We'd like to open up the floor for a couple of questions to Dr. Yadav. Yes. Is there a mic?
They can go to the mic there.
Okay. There's a mic behind the sound booth that you may come to ask a couple of questions.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Yadav. In your opening statement in the first 5 or 10 minutes, you had said a statement like, don't do pre-med. Right, and actually my son, who was sitting right by me, he was like, Dad, he was confused, and, same with, as you said, about curiosity, because everyone who wants to go into healthcare or medical, the first thing you hear is, do pre-med. So yours was an interesting statement. So for the students here who want to do healthcare, And to your point of not doing pre-med, then what is your suggested approach?
Right. So it's good. I just want to make sure you were listening. Yeah, so the worst thing you can say to a group of largely Indian American parents is don't be pre-med, right? It's like throwing a bomb out there, right? And what I mean simply is, you can take the prerequisites, but actually study something in depth. And you can be a philosophy major and still go to medical school, right? You can do a number of things. Don't be so focused on the end goal of the profession that you don't get broadly educated. And also, the other thing I've noticed is people are so preoccupied with their grades, right? Yeah. The calculation, that they take the prerequisites and a bunch of nonsensical classes. That really doesn't help you ultimately, right? So, because at some point in life, you actually have to know something and learn something, and college is by far the best chance to accomplish that. So that's my only meaning. Medicine's a great field. Simply go to college for the sake of going to college, and then go to medical school. Don't go to college just as a preparation to go to medical school. But that's the point I'm trying to make. And I'm also not in great favor of those 6-year college MD programs, because then you really don't get educated. And it sort of depends on what the goal ultimately is, right? If you actually want to move your field forward, you're going to have to know something more than everybody else in the field, right? So if you're doing exactly you have to be somewhat contrarian, otherwise you will regress to the mean, right? So you better have done something different somewhere, otherwise you won't be any different. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, doctor. Thank you. It was a very great talk. My question is going to be on the talk that you had and the last slide, that was the belief.
Yeah.
So you heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza?
I'm sorry, who?
Have you heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza?
No?
Okay. So this doctor, he got hurt, and his spine was broken and his body was broken. And then he says that he healed himself without any titaniums inside him, or what is inside him.
Yeah.
And do you believe that's possible in your medical experience?
Right, so I'd say we don't have enough information to reach a conclusion on that anecdote, right? So we always got to separate anecdote from science. So singular examples are very difficult to evaluate, right? So we don't know the nature of his injury, how bad was it, did he really have a fracture, et cetera. So a lot of possibilities. And yeah, your body will heal itself. Because remember, for millennia, people survived somehow, right? So so healing will take place. So again, we don't have enough data for me to really comment. I don't know the particular case.
He was the one which wrote the placebo effect.
Yeah, well, that's good you wrote that. So this is a long conversation. I don't want to, so yes, you can there's a meaningful interaction between the brain and the body, right? They're one unit. So yes, your mind certainly can influence your health if that's what you're trying to get at. Absolutely, no doubt about it, right? We just have to distinguish between sort of magical thinking and science. So yes, I'm a strong advocate for meditation, for a lot of things to improve the health of your mind and body. Now, whether, can you get rid of your high cholesterol just through other things? For most people, that's not true. And the danger you get into is that there are a lot of diseases for which people indulge in magical thinking, and pseudoscientific treatments, and it actually ends up harming them. In this particular instance, again, I can't comment, but as a general thing, science is the best tool that we have for reproducible evidence which can be verified independently.
Thank you, doctor.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So, when you did your college and your medical, etc., is there something when you started practicing that you said, man, I wish I had learned this in college? Like maybe not related to medical, but financial, bedside manner, communication, something.
Oh my God, we don't have enough time for that question, right? Yeah, a lot of stuff I still am trying to learn. So yes, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of stuff, and I think yeah, there's so much, right? I mean, we hopefully never stop learning. So college to me is just a preparation. Hopefully you learn how to think and the questions you should ask, right? And that you keep asking. So it's really, so I think the process of learning is what's critical, not the actual data points, right? So if you can learn how to think, how to analyze, how to synthesize different types of information, then you're in good shape for the rest of your life to learn stuff. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff I didn't know. Most things I didn't know, right? And so there's a long list of that. And certainly I would say, my other comment on, I guess there's a health session after this. My other comment on medical school is a process of trying to beat any creativity that you might possess out of you. So I would suggest all of you who are going to go that route, resist, fight. You know, the resistance, that's a joke, right? Applied to that and not necessarily just to politics, right? So keep your creativity, keep your ability to ask questions and think out of the box, because there's a strong, and it's somewhat logical in medicine because the risks are so high, but they really want to homogenize thinking and not have you think out of the box. So try to maintain that balance.
Thank you.
Dr. Yadav, I think you've demonstrated that a well-rounded, open-minded thinking kind of education is what launches you to higher successes within your profession and within yourself. I think you've demonstrated that the sky, actually no, the universe is the limit. So thank you so much, and we truly appreciate